Hi, and welcome to the B2B Academy Podcast. I'm excited about the opportunity to host Bogdan Litescu as a guest at today's session. At Tendency Services, we provide valuable learning and growth experiences to business leaders through the B2B Academy project. This is our contribution to the business ecosystem, and we would like to feature top business leaders like Bogdan sharing experience and knowledge that would help you develop your own marketing, sales, and sales operations. Under the B2B Academy, we are launching this podcast that will feature business growth related topics. In today's session, Bogdan is sharing a lot of interesting content and some of his amazing experiences on how you can shorten development cycles, how you can quickly get a proof of concept app, how you can use, this trend of democratizing development, and all of this under a streamlined, really neat, easy process that you can set up yourself directly on the Plant and App website. I loved his take on the ABM and some of his experience and advice in terms of what works, something that we believe is the future of marketing, which is educating your customers, building a community, building a partner channel, and becoming more personal with your marketing in general, especially when you address enterprise customers. That being said, please enjoy today's podcast and do let us know what other topics and guests you'd like us to host under the B2B Academy podcast. Don't forget to check out the amazing bootcamps we have organized, some of which will launch soon. Bogdan Litescu, the founder and owner of Plant and App, the current CEO. I think, Bogdan, you've been coding for quite a while. I think I read somewhere that from your teenage years you've been coding, right? And you decided to make a business out of an amazing passion.
I started early. I started when I was around 10 years old, but I haven't been coding for a long time. Since I started entrepreneurship, been less and less of that and more of business.
Okay, so would you mind introducing maybe your entrepreneurship journey, especially maybe a few things about yourself and about your company?
Sure. First of all, thanks, Loredana, for inviting me to this podcast. So a couple of words about me. I started the entrepreneurship journey in 2006, obviously in the technology space. Always been on the product side. That's my passion to build products, and especially let's say sophisticated, complex projects for helping developers and development teams deliver faster, optimize the development processes. This probably started from my belief that there is a lot of waste in software development. Me as a developer, I could see reinventing the wheel many times. I could see spending time on things that were not, let's say, unique, were not new. So that's why, that's how I arrived at building this kind of development-focused products. With Plant and App, we have a low-code platform that does just this. Automates a lot of building applications, so anyone can do it. The industry refers to this term as citizen development, basically meaning business users that are tech savvy. They can build 80-90% of the applications of course, we support from IT under the governance of IT, because when we get into the organization, that is very important. You don't want assistance in shadow IT. So just to add a bit more context, I've always focused on being international. So even from day one, we had international customers. Always US has been 60-70% of our total market. So that's the primary market. And I've been traveling a lot. I've been living in other countries as well. I've been living in the US. I've been living in Singapore, in Switzerland, in Scotland. and it's been a great experience to add to an entrepreneur, to an international entrepreneur. Living there is much more helpful than selling there remotely. You start feeling the culture, feeling the people.
I think that, as you mentioned, feeding the local culture and the different business cultures all around the world are important aspects, and especially in the digital economy. Even if, let's say, we can connect faster, over a call or something, it still, I believe, has a special value to meet people face to face, to see how people are behaving in their own business culture. It makes quite a difference. You're totally right. So talking about Plant an App, I'm amazed that you actually live by this promise that is saving 80 to 90% of the development effort. Actually, I have a lot of conversations with entrepreneurs that either want to start on their tech journey, so maybe they come from a different background, or like, I don't know, photography or some interesting creative place, or sometimes even from maybe more traditional B2B industries like industrial or heating or things like that. And I tend to see, first of all, it takes quite a while for them to make this digital transformation, right? To just, and it's usually not the idea or the strategy or the specs, but it's most of the time the development, because they may start the journey with a large team or effort. Yesterday I talked to someone that mentioned that they were putting like $100,000 on an app each month. And at some point it was so exhausting. And by the time that the app was developed, actually, they didn't have money to market it. They didn't have even time, like the time allocated was definitely overpassed. So they missed their go-to-market moment because the pandemic also came. So now they have like this $1 million tool that sits on a shelf that took too much to develop in terms of money and effort, and they cannot monetize it because they don't have any money to market it. You can get into traps like this, and I'm sure you can share many more from your own experience, where just having tool that saves you 80 or 90% of the development effort, but saves you the time. I think time is one of the most important assets. It's critical nowadays. Would you like to reinvent the wheel? No, of course not. You want to take the wheel where it's at right now. So can you maybe share a bit more about this kind of a case studies where you feel Plant an App really brings value, right? And of course it's the developers, but I kind of feel that maybe the developers, it still takes a while for a developer to realize that there's tools to shortcut their work, right? Are there any other, roles that you really help with the Plant an App solutions?
Yeah. So just to be clear, most of the development is Plant an App is not done by traditional professional developers. It's done by these business users that are tech savvy, and that changes a lot, because in a traditional development methodology, usually the two are decoupled and they have to negotiate a lot in the middle, and that's why it takes 1 year to build an application, because yes, the business asks, waits for 2 weeks to receive some changes, give some feedback, and it's a long feedback loop. In the low-code world, the business is part of the development. So most of the time, the business builds a lot of screens, a lot of processes, a lot of data manipulation. And IT is more like a support function, because what we learn is that professional developers, they don't want to use these platforms, right? They want to code, and we want them to code. We have developers that we want them to code. We don't want them to use this platform, right? But at Plantanet, for example, we have 20 systems that we built for ourselves in Plantanet. So from marketing system, partner portal, HR portal, even a DevOps system that builds Plantanet. All of these are built by non-professional developers. Because there's probably many factors when you go to on the custom development methodology. Of course, you don't have enough developers, or if you have enough developers, do you have the right developers, the best developers? Do you have the best leadership for those developers, the best process for those developers? Many factors that influence the outcome. So. Just to give you some examples, in the Plantanet world, maybe very rarely I'm hearing about a one-year project, because it also encourages this kind of fast iterations and lean approach. So, for example, a prototype in our world, to build a functional prototype that you can show to something, is 2-3 days effort. Okay?
Oh, that's amazing.
Prototype, you show it, you take feedback. Some of the changes you can do directly with the customer in the meeting, and get instant feedback, and then move to the next stage, an MVP maybe. An MVP will take maybe 2-3 weeks to get it out, and then you start learning and start iterating, rather than spending 1 year to see if it works. You start, of course, the lean approach, the lean startup approach, to learn early and fail early, to not make it a big and costly exercise.
I can imagine that, and I can see how agile this is, because many times, for example, I may have specific times in my schedule that are allotted to let's say, develop a new project or spin off a new project from the main company. And when I do that, I really need to focus on that 100%. But if it takes me, 3 months, then I'm on to something else. I don't have the time and focus to come back to the, while if you're done with, let's say, the initial MVP and so on, then the team can be off on their own and they can start coding based on the initial maybe feedback. I also had this recent conversation with another industrial client, and they do heating systems, but like smart heating units and systems. And they have their own team of developers, and they mentioned how difficult it is in certain areas of the world to have a local development team, because the big guys, right, the software developers and so on, they have a constant recruitment, retainment of personnel, policy management, as you mentioned, leadership for that team. They basically can keep that team motivated. But in such a competitive world, for someone that does not have a core business, let's say IT, to recruit talent, to retain talent, and to have continuity on development, it's a pain in the ass. And I noticed that they were looking at other solutions, including low code, to shortcut some of this process, which was definitely not effective. Every time someone else came in the team, because it was only a 2 or 3 people team, their development changed completely. So imagine that, right? Every time you restart, and they really had challenges retaining personnel. Again, I see quite a bit of value that you bring to the market. And as you mentioned, this sort of a business leader, maybe with a bit of a technology grasp, is a really good person to benefit, a role to benefit from having an HR platform, or from having a procurement platform, or from put together really fast, right, in really little time.
In reality, what we see work best is what is called fusion teams. So teams where you have busy people that know the business very well, the business case they're trying to solve, and technical people as well. Because then, of course, the feedback loop is instant. The business user also builds the application. He's not just saying what needs to be done. He actually does it and explains it to the developer. So it's much more working together rather than negotiating what needs to be done. And on the hiring and retention part, I think also it plays a very big role, because as a company, as you said, your core is not IT. What do you promise to a developer? Come to our company and you'll build forms and validations and send emails and generate PDFs. That's not attractive to any developer. That's boring. But since that stuff, it's already something easy to do with clicking, configuring, drag and dropping. Then the pitch to attract developer is like, oh, we are starting this new cool project that does this unique thing, because you don't care about the other thing, it's already sorted. It's about more innovation. So then when it's about more innovation, it's much easier to attract developers in a vision rather than on some tedious tasks that need to be done.
I can see only huge value in adopting such a platform in any development project, especially like in the startup, in the bootstrap phase, right? When you don't have a huge team, when you want to be involved in the development, when you want to have quick feedback loops and so on. Now, my question is, are the customers just rushing to your door? Are they, really? How is the market for such solutions? Is it easy for you to come across with so much value that you bring to the market?
Yeah, I will have to be honest with you. The enterprise world reacts much better to this value proposition than startups. So most of our customers, most of our revenue comes from enterprises. Enterprises of all sizes, especially in the medium and large area. They are more sophisticated from a technology perspective to adopt such a platform. When it comes to startups, I think most of the people that do a startup is probably their first technology project. But then I think that the local proposition sets some wrong expectations for them. So then, of course, any project as it increases complexity, tasks start taking longer and longer because everything that you do has ramification in other parts that you've already built. So we see people that come to build a startup that have previous technology experience doing very well with local, but people that come new, of course, they build something very fast in the beginning, but afterwards they get frustrated because their expectation is set wrong.
Okay.
Once they go to the custom development, then they understand the real value. You need to have something to compare it to really understand the value. Otherwise, technology seems simpler and simpler nowadays from a non-technical perspective. Click a button and does magical things. But behind the scenes, of course, there's a lot of sophistication and complexity to make that simplicity happen.
I can understand that. So what you're saying is that this emerging market for you is still uneducated. Basically, the customers, when bootstrapping their solutions, they still need to be educated in terms of, general development, right? The development phases of a project and not just the quick start. I also hear that, as usual, the big guys are quicker to adopt performant technologies. I remember, I've been on this market for quite a while, and I remember the same conversation we used to have about cloud computing, right? The big guys were all going cloud, like really early on. And the small guys were all looking around when in fact they should have been the first ones to jump to the opportunity because it was really cheaper back then. It was more effective and it allowed for better technology and access and even control and leadership. So it seems like a sort of a similar situation. But where do you think, like, what's your vision for this long term? Where do you think, like, I don't know, looking at the market, you see, okay, long term Plant an App can really help this user base, right? No matter if they're in small companies or in big companies, where do you see this happening?
Yeah, so our tagline is actually, we are creating superheroes of digital transformation. So basically taking these people that are tech savvy, they know technology, they do advanced stuff in spreadsheet in Excel, for example, or they do some kind of BI, or they do a bit of SQL. So this kind of people that starting solving their own problems with the tools they have at their hand. These people are the ones that take it to the next level, where they start having a platform, a system, an application, which adds a lot more automation, robustness, UI than a spreadsheet. Especially spreadsheet works for a one-person team or a small team, but when you grow to a big team, it becomes a mess to ensure that everybody sees the right data, there's some automation happening when you change a record or things like that. For us, the user base, so not necessarily the buyer, but the user base is this pool of people that is growing, because nowadays, technology is being sold in business schools as well. So it's common for people to learn a bit of SQL or a bit of Python in a business school. Because this was predicted a long time ago, and we see it happening, that technology, the ability to code, to talk to computers will become a skill, not a job, right? It will still be a job for some very more advanced, more sophisticated thinking and algorithms and new things. But for the bulk of it, it will be people building technology, democratizing development.
I can see
there's a big subject, and also Gartner has a big subject about where do you place this in an organization, because yes, if everybody starts building technology, you have a big problem with governance. So the future local platform, and where we spend a lot of time, is figuring out this part, making sure that the governance is good, because everything needs to be secure, everything needs to be audited, by IT, change management, deployments, and everything needs to be governed in some way. You cannot let people just, of course, if it's a small app just for me and my colleague, then maybe IT doesn't care. But if it's an app where customer or partners log in, or other departments log in, it has private data, IT needs to know and needs to make sure the security controls and procedures are in place.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how democratizing development is such a big topic. I recently saw, for example, my daughter learned programming in high school. She's in a technical high school. But my younger kid, the 6th grader, he's programming right now. He makes his own servers. It's like they almost learn development instantly. And I can see that this is becoming a skill, and it's not going to be an option whether you want to develop or not, but it's going to be something required in almost any job. I can also see how you can close this gap, like with technologies like Plant an App. So I really love how you said this making superheroes out of this spreadsheet, really advanced spreadsheet users and so on, because they would be the most to benefit. So I can see, like, accountants, pretty much anybody in back office benefiting off of that, anybody in leadership that still gets their reports on spreadsheets or something. So it's quite interesting. Now, you mentioned some challenges in regards to getting through to them. So there's this education piece. Have you tried educating them, or what have you tried focusing in terms of marketing and sales in general? What was your main focus, and what worked and maybe what didn't?
Sure. So with us, education starts in the sales process. We also invest a lot in education as a part both of the sales process and post-sales process. So we have an academy where people learn low-code and plant an app. We have partnerships with learning organizations that teach low-code to students. Students that are usually non-technical people. They want to learn technology and build systems. And we have amazing stories where people that had no prior experience managed to build complex systems. Also, we do a lot of technical webinars, training webinars. So every week we have something we call the Low Code Cafe, where we prepare new content, new training content every week. And I think that's part of the, let's say, technical education. People learning low code and what they can do with it, all the infinite possibilities. But of course, earlier than that, in the sales process, it's about, of course, educating a bit about this to non-technical people. Luckily, our job used to be much harder 2-3 years ago, but luckily nowadays, almost every person that we talk to, especially in the CIO world, in the enterprise, they would know what low code is. So the conversation becomes more about how are you different, what is a meaningful entry point, a low entry point for them to try it out, to see if it works for them. So I think in the past 2-3 years, since low code became mainstream, the market got educated a lot. So what we do in terms of education is showing the use cases, right? So we have over 50 use cases documented where we show, look what this customer has built in just 1 week or in just 3 weeks. So for example, we have a telecom company that built a customer portal, a B2B portal in just 3 weeks. It's amazing. Normally it would have been maybe a 1-year project. So stories like that educate people in the sense of showing them the possibilities and what can be done, because otherwise the low-code discussion is philosophical. Yeah, you can build much faster with less skills and everything, but it's philosophical. You don't attach it to anything. But when there's a use case that solves a problem that you have, then you start thinking, oh, this could work for me.
Mm-hmm. So your main means of marketing right now is educating your prospect base. Yeah. Do you do anything else on top of this? Like, is this an active community where people interact and ask questions and so on? Do you have like a partner channel that basically helps you get faster to the market? What other channels are you using?
Sure. So our main go-to-market is actually through partners, to system integrators, because especially in some enterprises where they don't have an IT department or this innovation kind of mindset and teams, they would rely on outside vendors to provide solutions for them, which are the system integrators that we work with, companies like Cegeka, Stefanini, like EY. So these kind of companies, they implement solutions for their customers, and part of the solution is of course Plant an App. We also have a community around the product, so we have a community forum where people help each other. We have also another weekly event, we call it Low Code Campfire, where the community gets together and they share their experiences, they help each other, so it's very cool. We record all of this content and post it on YouTube. Because, for example, this campfire, it's Friday at 6 p.m. Romanian time, which, and if you are in Australia, that's middle of the night for you, right? Of course, most of our customers are in the US, so that time works best for them. But since we are recording everything, it's easy for people to catch up, at least see what's been discussed and things like that. And I have to say, our sales process, and I'm sure this is universally available, it's about trust. We sell when we accumulated enough trust. Of course, there needs to be the need, the budget and everything. But besides that, it's the trust. So that's why you mentioned it earlier. Meeting people in physical world creates a bit of trust. Showing use cases, what others build, adds a bit of trust. Having a technical conversation, going through, the security of the platform or the scalability of the platform adds more trust. So that's that. I see the sales process as incrementally building trust until the tipping point for that customer to say, yeah, these are the guys that will take us somewhere. And that's why part of our sales process is also usually a proof of concept, a pilot, which takes usually 2-3 days. But every customer that we had so far and partner, when they see what can be built in 2-3 days, which normally in 2-3 days, maybe you have a couple of meetings and write a draft specification, don't really have time to write a specification for a pilot in 2 days. When they see that you actually have working software in 2 days that solves a problem for you, that's the biggest accumulation of trust.
Okay, I can see that. How does this work? So basically, if let's say I want to build, auction, let's say platform, right? On Plant and App, and I want to see a proof of concept in 2 or 3 days. Do I just maybe sign up on your website, or what's the best way to contact you?
Sure. So you could sign on the website and start building it yourself. Of course, it will not take 2-3 days because you have to go through the login, right? Or you reach out to us or to one of our partners, and they do it for you in 2-3 days. So because they already have the knowledge to build system, right? So I think the best way to reach out. Of course, we have a free plan on the website, so you can start exploring. We have the use cases on the website, so that serves well for inspiration. What can be done? What can I do with this? And of course, engaging in a conversation with us, it's always the easiest way to understand possibilities. We help prospects a lot, as you can imagine, discover where they can apply this, what problem can be solved, and usually, and even small organizations like you have a backlog of projects, a list of projects that you want to do but never got to do. Usually that's where we start with customers, and that's where the adoption starts, taking something from that backlog of ideas, where you already have a good idea what you want, and see what would this look like in 2-3 days.
Okay.
And then you have it in 2-3 days, and then you think, okay, let me show it to some customers, validate it.
To demystify this, I understand this is a quick process. We just need to reach out to you. Is that like a costly or expensive thing if we have someone in your team or some of your partners do it? Can you give us an idea of that for the audience? If it's custom, then it's fine. I'm just wondering if it's in the range that someone can definitely afford. Maybe some of the people that are watching this will just contact you instantly.
So you mean for the pilot?
Yes, for the pilot, let's say.
So it depends. Usually we are looking for commitments from customers. So either the commitment, they put resources, so that's a very strong signal that they want to invest in that, we grow together. Or we charge for the POCs if we have to. And usually the prices would be 2,000 to 4,000 euros, which we discount from the license. So it's just getting people's commitment, because as you can imagine, and as you can see easily happening, is that people will have an exploratory idea. Oh, let's see if this.
Let's test.
I don't have an intent, but let's see if this works. And of course, you need to have commitment, because we are a business as well and need to generate.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really affordable, and basically if you discount it from the overall license, then I think it's like a no-brainer. You can test it, see if it works. If it works, then you can go ahead with the rest of the project.
A developer will cost much more than that. Let's put it this way.
For sure, and it would take much more than 2-3 days, right, to get something functional. Okay, so that really makes sense. Now, I can see that, for example, you are really well set for what we call the next, the future of marketing, the next 5 to 10 years, meaning that you already do customer education. You already have an active and a partner community. You're already very close to your customer in terms of helping and supporting them succeed, right, fast and to fail fast also, so that they can learn from that. And it's all an agile process. You must have had either a lot of experience and try and test different things, or maybe you had some specific learnings or inspiration. So how come you came up with this process and this way of marketing and selling and business development?
I think it happened organically. It was not like a big aha moment. It was before we had Plant and App, we had a developer tools company, and in that business we didn't have any sales and marketing. We were on selling through a marketplace where people would find us, they would buy, they would tell others. So everything just exploded organically, and we are number one on that marketplace. Which means that we had more time and more focus to spend on the product, on supporting the product. So that's where we came really strong. When we started Plant and App, our biggest struggle was actually the other part, the sales marketing, which it was a bit foreign to us, and it took us a lot of time to understand that there's a big overlap between what we are doing, being close to the customer, honest, saying what works, what doesn't work, setting the right expectations. That builds trust, right? We always imagine that sales and marketing is this idea that some people that are very charismatic do, But of course, during the process, we found that actually trust sells, not, especially in our world, in the technology and enterprise world, it's the trust that sells, not the charismatic approach.
Yeah, I definitely could back this up even with data, because talking about Gartner has some studies out that show that almost 60% of the customer purchasing process is done before they reach out to a vendor, which means that you must have built some sort of channels for awareness and trust and real good documented, case studies, so that customer can know in advance what you're good at, that you can be referenced for specifically your area of expertise and so on. So I can definitely see how in this digital world we live right now, especially in B2B, of course, there's still a place for the charismatic salesperson all the time. But as a marketer, I can say that even when I started my own company years ago, I really had a challenge with this concept of, will I make it in sales? Because it seemed like such a tough world in technology, especially. But in fact, it was all about what you've just mentioned. It was about building trust more than the nice face you put on this. That being said, I believe that still in enterprise, you still have to do sort of a networking and the relationship building and sort of an ABM. Is that right?
Sure, we do, for example, a lot of conferences, physical conferences, because that's, the digital world, it feels that is very polluted. I get a lot of emails that I just delete, cold outreach, so I think it's a lot of pollution. Of course, it's good for awareness, some non-intrusive strategies, but what works for us best is the conferences, because especially after COVID, people are hungry for meeting other people and having a chat, and feeling the physical presence of a group and the ideas that are circulating around. Whereas the digital world forces you more like a unidirectional stream of content. It's not like it happens in real world ad hoc meetings, chats about anything, and somebody else steps in, that was not invited to that meeting. Somebody else says, "Oh, that's cool, I did this," So I think, and this adds a lot of trust, because of course, when you meet a person in person at a conference, you already established, it's a real person, at least, and I like it. He has some good ideas. He didn't say crazy things, So it's already a start of building trust. Whereas a cold email is not the start of anything, or an ad,
We can agree to disagree on this one. I'm just kidding, but I think that there is specific moments when a customer may reply even to an email, but I wouldn't call that like a cold approach, or I believe that if you do your research, if it's a really good fit, if, like, for example, let's say Plant an App, right? If someone is struggling in a company and you see them bringing 10 spreadsheets to a meeting and so on, I think that if they get maybe a call or an email saying, I see you're struggling with this, let me help you, or let me show you how you can do, easier and faster and better. Who knows? Of course, it has to be targeted. You have to do your own research. You have to catch them maybe in the moment that they're ready to get rid of the 10 spreadsheets and tables and so on. But there's, especially in enterprise, there is still room for ABM. When I say ABM, I mean it's a process that encompasses multi-touch points where people don't just hear from you once on an email and you've already done your homework to understand who's on the other side and not send an email, a generic email to anybody else out there. You've mentioned physical conferences, and I believe that meeting people face to face always has value. We've been through these weird times where meeting people was more difficult. It's picking up. I think that the digital conferences and so on, those are sometimes also okay-ish method, but I think that in physical conferences, networking is good. I also find industry associations, a good place to meet interesting people, right? Like, for example, CIO councils and so on. That must be interesting for networking, right?
Yes, I agree. And I agree with what you just said. I guess we don't have the maturity that you have, because I think account-based marketing works, right? If you do, like you said, if you do your homework well and you really understand the accounts that you are targeting, which of course we don't have we are not a marketing agency, so we don't have your maturity on it. So that's why for us events work better, because
But even with events, don't you follow up with an email? Like, for me, events are part of ABM. Like, they're part of a multi-touch point process, right? They're the first way to meet people. But if you don't follow up, and usually if you send them just an email, it's going to be received just as a cold email, right? Like, they will receive and they will forget that you met and so on. You have to send 3 more follow-ups to remind them how you met and so on.
Yeah, I think it complements, of course, a lot with digital marketing, because even before the event, you have to know the people that come there. At least, maybe some accounts, of course, by heart, but others would be just a persona, right? But of course, you have to announce it, you have to advertise that you are being there, you have to do something. For example, we have 2 conferences where we have a booth, so we'll have to do some advertising so people already know we are there. We are not just there and wait for people to come to us. So I think digital marketing plays a key role in a successful event. And especially, most of the conferences right now, they also have a digital application where you set your meetings, And of course, if you cold outreach to somebody to set a meeting right there, probably you'll have a low acceptance rate. Whereas if you start early and you do a bit of awareness, you might have a higher success rate. And after that, what you just said, the post-conference stuff, following up. And I think it's, to me, what I see is very important. Those follow-ups to be as personalized as possible. I think personalization is key, because people can tell nowadays if you send the same email to everyone. When I receive an email, I can say, this email is not about me, it's about everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I believe that, and I know that we also have the marketing on the organization and so on. I prefer to see the reality at the customer side, because usually customers have, let's say, they speak from their own experience. Like, even if we do marketing, if that does not yield results on the customer side, we spend our time and the customers spend their time. So I definitely see where you're coming from. And most companies, most IT companies, because they apply usually just one phase, let's say they send out an email, no follow-up, or they go to a conference and they don't send a string of follow-up emails, or and they stop at that point. Almost 80% of companies stop at this first point, and it doesn't matter how good it is. Sometimes they can get a referral even if you just follow up once to a referral, that's not enough. You have to follow up like at least 4 times to get something out of that referral. The person may be busy when they received the email, they forgot you received the intro and so on. That's why I was thinking that perhaps this process is not just about, and I can get how conferences have a place in this process, but I think that one moment is not enough. It has to be a longer, more let's say, well-sequenced process, let's say.
That's just the lead generation.
We can build up a tool with Plantain app to do the sequencing really well.
As you can imagine, we have a system that does a lot of sequencing for Plantain app for our emails.
I could imagine that you've already done so. I think there's a lot of application for your technology in marketing. So any last thoughts, any last minute advice, anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I think we are now at the stage in the digital transformation maturity where investing in building systems, it became more cost effective than not having it. So not having it means having more people, to do manual operation. It means higher onboarding costs, because if you have a system that automates everything, an employee, you don't onboard them in 3 weeks. In 3 days, maybe, just learn a bit of systems, whereas if they have to do everything manually, higher onboarding costs. And also employees nowadays, they select companies based on the digital systems they have. Nobody wants to work in legacy systems that take an age to do something and they have to do it in spreadsheet anyway. So I think we are at that point where the cost of having technology is much lower than the cost of not having it and struggling with all of this. And examples are all around us. We have all these very automated services that we use. Mobile application where you open it, you do a few clicks and does pay the bills or schedules a taxi or things like that. So imagine how the taxi industry looked like 20 years ago. Where they had a big call center with where somebody would take your call and dispatch it. All those people are it's a much smaller team nowadays. Some still have it, but more transform it maybe in a support center. Now everything is done by technology. So imagine the cost difference between the two approaches.
Yeah, I can remember when I last used a taxi. I'm usually using Uber, so it was a transformation even on the customer side. And I think that there is no chance right now you can succeed in any domain of business without technology, right? Now you can do this the hard way, spend significant money and time on building technology from scratch and learning how to manage and work with a development team. Even recruit if you go that far as to be, in control 100%. But there's faster, easier ways. Again, I always come back to this. Let's not reinvent the wheel, right? We already, let's Uberize the development effort, basically.
And maybe to position the other side of the problem as well, there are these big problems, these big platforms out there, that. For example, ERP is a good example. Mm-hmm. They promise to solve, let's say, a problem, but in reality, ERPs are about a lot of consulting and customizations. And I haven't heard an ERP implementation that didn't take longer than 1 year, shorter than 1 year. Sorry, it's usually 1, 2, 3 years until you implement an ERP. So I think that's where low-code sits actually between these big systems that they may transfer trust because they are a big brand, but in reality, they take a long adoption rate and they are difficult to change, difficult to extend. And at the other spectrum, of course, you have the custom development that's very flexible, but expensive as well, takes a long time. So low code is positioned between these two, have the power of a big platform, a big solution already out of the box, but very customizable in an agile way to do it incrementally and do it inside the team, not rely on external consultants, or at least rely on some specific particular implementation help, business analysis, not on a 1 or 2 year kind of project.
Great. Thanks so much, Bogdan, for your time. I really appreciate all the advice and experience you shared.
Thanks a lot for having me, Loredana, and I really enjoyed the chat.